Okay. This is the October 18th, 2022 special committee of the whole meeting to talk about developments at the golf club. I'll call the meeting to order. Let's have a roll call, please.
Trustee Hallwax. Here. Trustee Listener.
Here.
Trustee Mulvaney. Trustee Onderdonk. Here. Trustee Rubin.
Here.
Trustee Bree. Here. President Rowan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We are not live streaming this meeting tonight, but we are video recording and make the recording available on the village YouTube channel. The next part of the agenda is public comment. This portion of the meeting allows those in attendance to address the board regarding non-agenda items, not the golf club. I'll request the public comments relate to agenda items when we reach that item on the agenda. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll notify a speaker when their time is up. Are there any comments not about the golf club development? Let me say that in anticipation of this meeting, the village board or various of us have received letters. We're looking at them, we're paying attention to them. They matter. We recently heard from Writers Theater, we heard from Tannic Garden, we've heard from individual citizens. We're glad to hear from everybody. Okay, the next item on the agenda, what everybody's here for, is update and continued discussion on efforts related to the Glencoe Golf Club clubhouse replacement. And I will ask our golf club manager Stella Nanos and village manager Phil Corrali to present on this.
All right, well, I'm going to get started. Good evening, everybody. For those of you in the audience who don't know who I am, I'm Phil Corrali. I'm the village manager here in Glencoe. Tonight's discussion is we're going to work through a lot of information that we have assembled. Much of this information was in the packet that was posted on the village's website last week. So if you would like to go back and review it, please do so. That will be available, as will tonight's recording, as President Rowan mentioned. Just quickly to run through what the presentations will be. There'll be several presentations from staff as well as members of the Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club. We are going to do some brief review of the previous discussions that the board had on the subject, in particular, some of the discussion back on June 16th, the last time this was discussed. We're going to provide some information that was requested at that meeting, which involves alternatives to the clubhouse design that had been discussed, as well as some updated project costs. As I mentioned, there will be a report and an update from the Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club. And then finally, we will work through review of financing options and the potential structure should the board choose to seek a referendum question on this topic. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Stella to continue through.
Thank you, Phil, and good evening, everyone. My name is Stella Naus. I'm the general manager of the Glencoe Golf Club. I want to welcome you all to our 101-year-old building and the beautiful grounds of the Glencoe Golf Club. We're very happy to have everyone here, and thank you in advance for your support and attention as we review all of the clubhouse development plans. We're going to begin with just a quick review of our previous discussions. We did bring some materials to the village board in June regarding this subject. The buildings themselves have been determined to be beyond their useful life since 2012 on the clubhouse task force that was created at that time. And there has been no significant investment in the buildings since then because we were told we were getting a new clubhouse. So the monies that have been invested in the buildings have just been to keep us operational. We are now at a point where we are at an urgent time to invest in these buildings so that we can continue to be successful and operationally sound. The purpose of the replacement is to diversify our revenue streams, provide a better community amenity, and meet the needs of the golf club into the future to help us thrive for the next 100 years.
One of the items that we wanted to just take a beat to underscore has been a number of the steps that have been taken really since the conclusion of the work of the Clubhouse Task Force back in 2012. As is well known, I think at this point, the Glencoe Golf Club exists on property that is jointly owned by the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, as well as the Village of Glencoe. An agreement had been approved back in 1923 that was relatively modest in its structure and needed quite a bit of updating. And there was a long process that involved much of the staff that's sitting at the table tonight, as well as a number of members of the village board over time, and former village president Larry Levin, to renegotiate a first amendment to that agreement with the Forest Reserve District of Cook County. After several years of spirited negotiations, we arrived at an approved first amendment to that agreement in June of 2017. We did include that full agreement in the packet this evening as well, so that's available. Another aspect of the work that the Clubhouse Task Force did that related to this project was a focus on the possibility of fundraising and to find ways of investing private resources into this public facility. One of the goals of doing so was the creation of a 501c3 organization, and that is the Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club. You'll be hearing from some folks that represent that group a little bit later this evening. That was ultimately created in 2019. As a component of that as well, a fundraising feasibility study was completed by Campbell & Company. We did also include that in the packet tonight, so you can reference that. It was completed in 2019 and provided some guidelines and structure for the fledgling Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club as they got started. In addition, the village board approved a policy in 2021 to forgive some outstanding debt that had been owed to the general fund from the golf fund, and to do so over a period of time to accommodate those resources being reinvested into this project and to other projects at the Glencoe Golf Club. And then really since the conclusion of the work of the task force in 2012, there has been preliminary work with an architectural firm, FGM Architects, as well as WB Olson, both of whom have provided some of the information that we have this evening in terms of preliminary design concepts, preliminary cost structures that would relate to that. There has been no formal agreement with FGM or WB Olson in any way from the standpoint of proceeding with the project, but they have been partners with us along the way, and we just wanted to underscore that.
Thank you. The clubhouse replacement concept plans were designed based on feasibility studies from 2012. There were several outside organizations that were retained to provide these studies that helped the board determine the location, the size, functionality, and at that point we had estimated costs. One of the studies was also about food and beverage and the demand for business in this area and the lack of affordable party space or private event space. So the original plan that was created was based on all of these elements. We have met with, as Phil has indicated, our architects who were also determined from that feasibility study in an RFP process. We have met with the architect based on the recommendation or request of the village board after the meeting, the whole meeting in June, to research other options, other concepts that may have reduced costs. So we were going to also present an option A and B. and prefabricated building, which was also something that came out of that meeting, the whole meeting. So why are we building a new clubhouse? I think everyone knows why. One thing to emphasize is that this is definitely a need and not a want. And we're not a 20, 30, 40-year-old structure that just wants to upgrade and try to make more money, that we really have to replace these buildings because they are not functioning any longer. And part of replacing them comes with a benefit that will help offset the cost, and that is incremental revenue. We have done some work to determine what we believe the estimated incremental revenue would be after the new clubhouse, and that would range from $300,000 to $325,000 annually, in addition to what we're currently earning annually. The new buildings would provide year-round restaurant and bar, broaden our programming of outside services. It would be a new destination in the village and a family-friendly venue. Highlights would be an increase in play, because we're expecting people to become more interested in coming here and being able to stay afterwards. Right now, people come and play golf here, and unfortunately, they get in their car and they meet at a bar somewhere else because we just don't have the venue. We also cannot handle or accommodate outings, which bring in a lot of business. Outings is one of the categories that you can do an upcharge on for service, and you make a lot more to your bottom line for outings. We don't have the facilities for that. Along with the outings comes the after party. Friends or family service had their outing here this year. They had no dinner afterwards because we couldn't accommodate. The chamber asked to have their outing here. We couldn't accommodate their size. They would have to bring in a tent and seating and everything like that, and it just becomes cost prohibitive. These are just a couple of examples. I probably turn away 20 private parties a year with no advertising. People are just looking. We can't accommodate a shower or a birthday party or a kid's party. Oh, my son loves golf. We'd like to come out and have this. I can't accommodate because we don't have a separate room, and this is our only room for everyday golfers, and you don't want to have a party with people walking through. So we are looking for incremental revenue. These are just an example, and as you walked in, these are hung as well. These are concepts that were designed. Keep in mind, everything that we're reviewing tonight is strictly a concept. These were designed in-house with staff based on the feasibility study. We're trying to incorporate a place that would be inviting to all in the community. The first plan that we're going to review is our original plan. This plan is the one that was created in 2012. At that point, staff met with the clubhouse task force, and they were asked, what would you like? Pie in the sky, everything that you would desire in the clubhouse. So this is the full scale restaurant, indoor outdoor bar, a terraced fireplace, the full basement to not only accommodate carts, but also additional storage, moving and building a new clubhouse, a new maintenance building, a new parking lot, demolition of the existing buildings. This is obviously the most expensive concept, coming in at 19 million. The architect engineering fees and contingencies are also included in that number. I can't emphasize enough that this was originally our pie in the sky plan. We know that the cost of this is not going to justify how much more we would make incrementally. This is what we had originally kind of vetted out, and we had since then met with FGM architects to bring this down. And that's where we're going to go now. This was the original plan and concept and how it looks. The square footage on this is 11,000, over 11,000. That's just for the main floor. It doesn't include the basement and storage. The seating in here is pretty significant. 192 for interior seating, 86 for outdoor seating, full service kitchen, locker rooms with showers, and full size pro shop for displays. So this was our all-in pie in the sky idea. And this is where we started working with the architect to save money. So how could we save money on this concept? The easiest way is to reduce square footage. And that's what we did. So our first option here is a reduction in square footage. We have reduced the pro shop and offices, locker rooms, the kitchen circulation, and a portion of the dining room for a total square foot reduction of 1,500. We have also eliminated the outdoor bar, the outdoor fireplace. And because of those reductions, there's subsequent cost reductions in equipment, fixtures, architect fees, contingencies, demolition of the maintenance building, because we also took the maintenance building out of this plan. So this plan at 14.6 includes a basement, but the basement size is reduced. So it's not the full basement, it's about 50% of the square footage for the basement. So we can still store carts in the new clubhouse. That's an element that I think is essential if we're gonna make a cut. Reducing the size of the basement is fine just to accommodate carts. But we can't eliminate the basement as a whole, in my opinion. Having carts storage in the basement would reduce our labor costs. It reduces resources, because right now our carts are parked outside. We have to wash them when we put them away, and we have to wash them when we take them out because they're on gravel. So that's something that I think is pretty important to this. The new maintenance building would be eliminated from this plan. So what does that mean? The building, as you pull in, that is our maintenance building, that would remain. We would have to restructure where the parking lot would go, because in the original plan, parking would go somewhat along where the maintenance building currently is. So the parking lot would have to be adjusted. The actual location of the clubhouse would have to be adjusted a little bit further to the north as well. Parking lot still accommodating 205 cars. That's essential to the project as a whole. We currently only have 144 spots and we run out of places. So bringing in incremental revenue, we would definitely need additional parking. So option A, to take away from this, it's just a reduced basement size. We can still put the carts down there. We do eliminate moving the maintenance building, outdoor bar and fireplace are eliminated. Square footage reductions throughout, and then there are cost savings for an estimated cost of 14.6. When we're talking about costs, this is all concepts. We have nothing in front of the architect. We don't have any real design elements. So WB Olson was taking a stab based on, this is what we recommend for square footage, and this is what our costs are. This is all very conceptual. Nothing is written in stone here. The second option is option B. Everything from option A is included in this, but this also eliminates the basement. In my opinion, that's a big loss to the overall project. The basement and the cart storage is essential. So this eliminates the basement. It leaves the maintenance building in place, eliminates outdoor bar and fireplace, and the same square footage reductions are seen in this one for a total cost of 13.4. Another option that we were asked to investigate was a prefabricated building. An estimated cost that we received on that would be around $5 million. A prefab building would just give us restrooms, a very small kitchen to operate, and some sitting space. Obviously, there's no incremental growth opportunity, puts us at a complete competitive disadvantage, and it's still a very significant investment, and there's no added benefit. I don't think that should be a concept that should be considered. We're going to move forward now with a report from friends of the Glencoe Golf Club. I'm going to invite up Dale Thomas, Pam Kinsey Lungmas, and Ellis Goodman to give us an update on friends. Dale, can you come up to the podium, please? Ellison and Pam, come on up here. So Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club, as Phil mentioned, was established in 2019. This was an initiative to try to offset the costs of this public building with private funds. And building a brand new 501c3 from the ground up is pretty difficult. I'm very proud of where Friends is right now and the traction that they're starting to make, considering they've really only been requesting gifts for the last maybe 18 months. I think they've made significant progress. So I'll turn it over to Dale Thomas, who is our president and chairman.
Well, as Stella said, we've been at this for a while. The good news for all of you, and I know virtually all of you, is that even though I can be long-winded, you're not going to hear any long-winded from me. I suspect you're tired of hearing my release on behalf of this project, which I feel very strongly about. But there are going to be two people who will give you more detail about. First, Pam Kinsey Lungmas is our fundraising consultant, and she's very well regarded in this area, and she will give you a description of what we've done. And then, rather than I tell you how great this project is, which I believe it is, we've asked Ellis Goodman to give a presentation. He is a member of the board. I think that you recognize that Ellis and his wife Jillian have contributed a great deal to Glencoe, to Rikers Theater, and to the garden. And they are also contributed a lot to this project to them, and they are, I think, very enthusiastic about it. So with that, Pam.
Yes, so since I've been working with the organization, we moved forward with a outreach to the community. We raised in pledges over 600,000, above 600,000, and continue to meet with and engage new people in the project. We've been engaging new members to get involved in the board. We have been reaching out to individuals to be levels of sponsors with the organization. We have begun meeting with businesses around the Glencoe, talking to them about partnering with us and being involved in this activity and what that means. And we got a lot of people who are excited to see the next step we take with this project, what happens here at this meeting tonight and where we go. There remains, like in every community, particularly communities like Glencoe, a number of people who are philanthropically interested in advancing activities in their community that are going to better the community for their current status and for their children's status. And I think a lot of people are very interested in that aspect of this project. So we're going to continue going out into the community and talking to people and continuing this private, hopefully public partnership as we move forward.
Good evening. Nice to meet many of you. Some I know, some I don't. I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to what I hope will be a compelling argument that you will approve of to allow us to move forward and take the Glencoe Golf Club and transform it for the next 100 years. As you know, this is a unique and beautiful golf club, and all credit to Stella and her team that have managed to keep it going and keep it solvent through terrible obstacles, including, of course, the latest pandemic, and at the same time operate in the salubrious surroundings here. As you can see, we don't have to make a case about the clubhouse, you just have to look at it. So that's why we're here, and we think that this is an opportunity to add to the golf club itself. So we've come up with a new logo and umbrella, if you like, called the Club at Glencoe. And the Club at Glencoe is going to cover all the other activities that go on in this golf club right now, and which we want to enhance and introduce to our community. So that every family here can have their own club and be part of what we have to offer. So as we look at what we're talking about, in addition to the new clubhouse, this is more than a golf club. And we will offer new experiences and opportunities to every resident. Some of the highlights of this redevelopment will be revealed very shortly. And we'll also be describing what the long-term goals of the Friends are. And you'll have to look at a glimpse to start with of our new website, which is at www.glencofriends.org. So we start off with the Club of Glencoe, which is the umbrella logo we're going to be using. More than a golf club. And we need your support. Because this golf club amazingly does 44,000 rounds of golf. And has no tax support, as you know. It's not part of the partnership. But we can offer a community benefit for the next 100 years if we can move forward with this redevelopment of the clubhouse and all the other things we're going to try and do. So we start with the club enhancements, and you can see we're going to be improving the golf range, the golf academy, the indoor simulators and training center, and the school outreach programs, which is so important because the golf academy brings the kids in, the kids get enthused about golf. We have all these school programs and competitions going on with a lot of local schools. That is bringing in families, or it would bring in families if we had something more to offer, and that's what we intend to do. In addition to that, we have community amenities, which will include everything from our cornhole, beanbag toss game, which apparently is quite popular across the country. We are pleased to say that it won't involve pickleball. We're not doing that. But we do have a community garden to offer. We're going to put in a bicycle repair and rest station because we're so near to the trail, Green Bay Trail, and there's a demand for that. We're also going to be looking at winter activities, including tobogganing, winter sports. We'll get there in a minute. There you go. Other amenities, cross-country skiing and tobogganing, bird watching, because we're a member of the National Audubon Society. We have a variety of beautiful birds here. We have a summer kids camps where they can learn about our flora and fauna and the environment. Stargazing for people that can come and want to do that and look into the skies in a very dark environment. And also other activities which involve families. So we're trying to make this a club. So like all the amenities of a private club available to the public. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. And that's what we're trying to do. So we encourage you to visit the website and to share it with all your friends, so everyone can learn about our enhancements and development projects. And I think that's about it, really. Oh, sorry, the croquet club, very important. My wife calls out the croquet club. So we're going to have the Village of Glencoe Croquet Club, and it's going to open next spring because we're far down the line on that one. Croquet is a sport that's growing 35% a year. And it's amazing how much enthusiasm we're having for bringing this croquet club. And after everybody has the first laugh in which they say, oh, I used to play in our backyard when I was a kid, it was really great. Or they say, everybody's 100 years old to play this game. It's not quite true. In fact, the World Championships held in Sussex in England this year were led by a 15-year-old from California. So it is a competitive, interesting game, and it brings a whole new group of people in. And we're very confident that this will work very well for the club. It will bring new people, new families, and a lot of new revenue to the clubhouse and the other activities that we'll be doing. That will start, we hope, at the beginning of the spring next year. We will also have a family event hall where families can enjoy various other events and parties. We do, bring families together is the big thing. In fact, if you look at the logo, it starts off with a family eating dinner at this club. So I think I've covered it all really now, with a bit of luck. So these are ambitious plans. The improvements are necessary, particularly the clubhouse is absolutely necessary. I mean, this place, we don't have to keep going into it, but I mean, we need to do something desperate here. But if we will ensure the future of this priceless Glencoe asset, if we can get the support of the board of trustees, and then through a referendum, Glencoe public and a media community to achieve these goals and have a wonderful facility that will be the gem, not only in Glencoe, but of the whole of the North Shore. Thank you very much.
So before we get to a discussion of financing, how we might pay for this, I have a list of, there was a sign-in sheet for public comments. We've heard from most of the people who signed in to comment. But we were going to want to hear from individuals. But there's one more person that said, speaking on behalf of an organization, which is a village-sponsored organization, the Golf Advisory Committee, Greg Turner. Maybe this is the time, since we're hearing from the organizations, if you would.
President Roman, Eva Levy from the Golf Advisory Board is going to speak as well.
Oh, great, okay. Didn't sign up, but okay with me.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Greg Turner. I serve on both the Glencoe Golf Club Advisory Committee and the Plan Commission, a resident of 11 years here in Glencoe. And on behalf of the communities we represent, we'd like to encourage you to support allowing the residents of Glencoe the ability to decide if they support the investment in this facility. As you know, the golf course was initially created by a group of residents who pulled together and overcame hurdles to join village land with forest preserve land to create a tremendous golf course that has never before seen the amount of use it has over the last several years. And the investment we would like the residents to vote on takes an already highly valued facility and makes it more inclusive, incorporating croquet and function facilities, potentially warming stations with hot chocolate for cross-country skiers in the winter, and many other uses to enable a broader community to take advantage of this great natural facility. Speaking of facilities, please do go in and check out the restrooms while you're here. And please do let the residents vote. Thank you to the staff for all the hard work and effort that's gone into creating this presentation. And thank you, trustees, for your service.
I've been a resident for over 35 years and raised my region. I know many of you in attendance. And thank you for all being here. I'd like to tell you why I support this project from a little bit of a different perspective. I'm chair of the Golf Advisory Committee and also the past president of the Women's Glencoe Golf League and its current treasurer. We are a body of 40 women strong who golf here at this beautiful, challenging, very challenging golf course every Tuesday and many times on Mondays, Thursdays, occasionally on the weekends. And we have had the opportunity to golf at other facilities through our team. So we are part of a network of public courses where we have competition among each of the teams. So not only do we do that, but we have had the opportunity to golf at their golf courses, which are not as challenging nor as beautiful as ours. But also we've had the opportunity to take a look at their clubhouses. And are we a little envious? Unequivocally, we're a little envious. And the opposite is also true. When our competitors come here, they find our golf course just beautiful, challenging, everything you want from a golf course. Then they step into this facility. And you think sometimes we don't have air. Sometimes the water doesn't work. Sometimes the kitchen can't be as efficient as it is. And they think, you know, you're kind of an affluent community. What's going on with you? So Bottom line, I'm appealing to all of you for your approval to get the amendment on the spring ballot. It would benefit the community. I would certainly be really happy about that, but I think it'd be a big help for Glencoe. So thank you. Thank you for all your hard work.
So we're gonna talk, I think, next about financing. Before we do, let me say thanks. Look, I'm not a golfer, although I live on 18th fairway. But I know that the Glencoe Golf Course and Club are one of the crown jewels of Glencoe. And I thank Stella for making it that. She's probably one of the crown jewels too. Dale, Pam, Ellis, Greg, Eva, thank you for all your hard work, and many of the people here for all of your hard work on this. So let's see if we can.
Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Nikki Larson. I'm the finance director for the village. We've spent a great deal of time taking a look into how the village might afford the improvements that were outlaid for you. While the Friends of Glencoe Golf Club have done a wonderful job in fundraising, obviously $14 million plus is a long way away from where we are today. So as we consider a potential referendum, the village would need to look at options for financing, whether it would be a general obligation bond versus an alternate revenue bond. The difference between those two, for everyone today, the general obligation bond would come with the village's full faith and credit, meaning that it would attach to properties within Glencoe and generate an automatic debt service levy. The village would be able to borrow, and then it would be repaid through levying property taxes. The village does have the ability, and we'll get into this in a moment, to abate a portion or all of that property tax levy. That decision is made on an annual basis of whether or not we let that year's debt service payment go through the property tax levy, or if the village had sufficient funds on hand, we could pay it off with village funds. An alternate revenue bond would, by the contrary, not be backed by the full faith and credit of the village. It would be entirely dependent on revenue that would be generated from the golf course. In today's environment, golf courses are very successful, but it hasn't always been that way, and it is largely dependent on weather. For that reason, if we went forward with an alternate revenue bond, if the market would accept it, the interest rate would be much higher and essentially cost prohibitive for the village and the community. So what we would recommend moving forward would be a 20-year general obligation bond. The difference in the interest could be as much as 100 basis points. On a $15 million issue, depending on how it's structured, we could be talking about millions of dollars in interest costs on a differential. So if we were to move forward with a general obligation bond, we estimate the annual property tax impact to a Glencoe household at $93 per 10,000 in property taxes paid for a $10 million issue, or $140 for every 10,000 that you would pay for a $15 million issue. There's also currently approximately $800,000 in the golf fund right now. Those are reserves that are free and available to spend that Stella and her team have worked very hard to aggregate over the years. And that money would be available to be spent first. So as the project would continue, that reserve would be depleted, and then any incremental revenue that would be generated could either be used towards the project or be used to pay down that debt. As we complete the project, any incremental revenue that would be used, we're estimating for each $100,000 in revenue generated that was used to abate the property tax levy, that would reduce those numbers above by $10 for each $100,000 that's generated. In looking at how this fits in the village's overall financing plan, I apologize, this is a little bit small. The stacked bars there show what we are planning to issue over the next 10 years for our existing capital plan. The village board will be talking about this in November when we present the draft budget. We do have the 10-year CIP that's been updated. We have financing plan for both general obligation bonds, to finance things such as streets, sewers, sidewalk improvements, and then also alternate revenue bonds. The green area on top there would be how a $10 million bond issue would fit into that 10-year plan. Essentially, it goes a little bit further out than 10 years, but it would show how that would slot in. The line at the top of the chart is the historic high water mark of the village, adjusted for CPI, which is much higher than it used to be. That was the highest debt payment ever that the village ever had. So you can see, even if we added another $10 million in bonds, we would still be well below that historic watermark. We do have some restrictions in terms of when we would need to borrow. We didn't really go into that tonight, but there is a caveat in the agreement with the county that financing will need to be issued by a certain date. That prohibits, or I guess restricts us a little bit of when that debt payment would jump up. So you can see right around 25, 26 that annual debt payment jumps up, and then it knocks down as we start to pay off general obligation issues. Typically what we try to do is slot new bond issues when others are dropping off to try to keep that service levy fairly even. So the estimates that we have before you today, that $93 and that $140 is at the start of the property tax levy. As we pay off additional levies, that dollar amount will also come down, the overall levy of the village. On a $15 million bond issue, you can see that the debt level is raised quite a bit higher. So that would start around the same time period, and again, would go through the full 20-year life of the bonds. Because the village is not home rule, we are restricted to issuing only a 20-year bond based off of a referendum. We could not extend that term any farther unless we went with an alternate revenue bond. An alternate revenue bond would allow for up to a 40-year term, but again, that interest rate would be significantly higher. The other option that's not pictured here today would be to phase a general obligation bond issue. Similar to what the village had done in 2021, when we went to referendum for $10 million, we issued $7 million in bonds in 2021, and then we'll be issuing the remaining $3 million that was authorized by referendum in 2024. This financing could also be phased in a similar manner. You do have to issue bonds within 5 years of a referendum being approved, but you can do it in several tranches. That would also allow the Friends of Glencoe Golf Club additional time to fundraise, and it's potentially would be able to reduce that bond issue size overall. So if we were able to raise more money, we could downgrade the dollar amount of that second bond issue as well.
So we'll finish up the staff portion of the presentation, just talking a bit about the referendum process. And there are a number of members of the board who have gone through this before, but I think it warrants a bit of a refresh. The village board essentially, in order to place a referendum question on a ballot, must take action, and that action is an ordinance that lays out the language of that question. That ordinance must be considered not less than 79 days in advance of an election. The referendum question, as I mentioned, is included in that ordinance, or would be included in that ordinance, and it's drafted in consultation with the village's bond council. While there is an election on November 8th, 2022, obviously we're far closer than 79 days from that election. So the next election that is scheduled is the April 4th, 2023 municipal election. Understanding the timelines that are required that I mentioned just a moment ago. In order for a referendum question to be placed on that ballot on April 4th, the board would need to take action at its December 15th, 2022 meeting. Or it could take action later than that, but again, not less than 79 days in advance. So a special meeting would need to be called in order for that to take place. Nikki has already underscored kind of that last bullet point in terms of the total and what that referendum might seek. But I think it's important to underscore that fundraising can certainly still impact the amount of public participation in the project cost. That being said, the village can always issue less than it requests, but it cannot issue more. And so the consideration, I think, that's also helpful as the board continues its discussion is, what is the appropriate request from the community? What we want to make sure is that there are adequate resources and understanding that Friends and the continuing revenue perhaps or reserves that the golf course may have available to it are certainly resources that are available, but perhaps are not guaranteed. And if we commence a project, we want to make sure that we have sufficient resources to finish that project. Otherwise, we won't be able to meet the commitment that we've made to the community through the process. So I just wanted to make mention of those two things as we contemplate next steps. And again, we are happy to answer questions that you may have. I know President Rowan, there are others who have signed in who may wish to offer some public comments, but that kind of that's the conclusion of the staff presentation portion of this. And again, we're available for questions.
Can I ask a question? Because
Sure.
we have discussed before, which is if we went to an obligation bond, which makes sense, I think, one of the philosophy, so as opposed to alternate revenue bond, nonetheless, the village did whereby a certain amount of revenues from the operation that to help the village pay down the line, so long as there were caveats in there to take account of whether various down years, would that still be a possibility?
Absolutely.
I have a question also.
Okay.
What's the average property tax bill in town? Very difficult question. Well, I mean, bottom line, $10 million issue, let's call it $100 per, per 10,000. So I'm just, obviously people who are not golfers are going to be the hard sell. And I've been taking an informal poll of friends who are not golfers. And there's going to be a tipping point to get the votes, not just, assuming the referendum gets put on the ballot, the next thing is to try and convince people to vote in favor of it, obviously. And whereas maybe we can assume that everyone in Glencoe that golfs here will vote in favor, I believe that that population is not enough to end up with a positive vote on the referendum. So we're going to need to convince people in the village that this is an underappreciated jewel in the crown that would be wonderful to enhance. And the question they're going to have is, how much does that cost me? And so, if the average property bill in the village is $20K a year, 200 might be a pill people can swallow, and that's a $10 million bond issue. A $15 million bond issue would be more like 300 on their tax. And I have a feeling the tipping point is somewhere in there. But we don't know what the average property tax bill in Glencoe is.
So
I was just gonna make just one comment to help perhaps. I think what the village has always done as we have deliberated and dialogued around referenda, and we have done 2 in the last 8 years, has been to try to do what we've done tonight, which is to provide an estimate based off of our best calculations. And that estimate relates to a number of things, and I'll let Nikki talk to that specifically in terms of interest rates, and things like that, that get us to that $93 or $140 per 10,000 of property tax. The reality behind it is it may, like all of the numbers we've talked about, vary slightly depending upon a myriad of factors, but it's an estimate that provides an information point that individuals are going to have to utilize to determine their perspective on whether to support or not. And so it's about as simple a calculation as can be produced, we think, from the standpoint of what staff generates for board discussion. And that is information that we would certainly make readily available if the board moves forward. But I will note that, I think it's important to underscore this, the village, if the village board chooses to move forward with a referendum question, the village itself has a limited amount of information that it may share with the community from the standpoint of supporting a referendum question. We have the ability to share factual information, not opinion. We have the ability to underscore and share studies that have been conducted. But beyond that, the village is limited in what it has the ability to lobby, if you will, the community on. And so we take that very seriously. There are state statutes in place that dictate how that is structured. And so what we have always sought to do is to build out projections that are factual and that people can utilize as they're making decisions for themselves.
If I can just add to that, the answer to your question is complicated because of the comparability of properties in Glencoe. So property taxes are assessed based off of the value of your home, right, and the square footage and how much land you own. So we have some homeowners in Glencoe where their average tax bill may be $12,000 to $15,000 a year, or you may have someone more in the range of $40,000 a year. So what we try to do is communicate it in increments that people can easily calculate, right? A $10,000, you can do that in your head, so that it's a little bit easier for people to get there. The calculation that we do is based off of consultation with our bond attorneys and our financial advisors, what they think the market will be. I mean, really, it's anyone's guess right now where interest rates are going to be in 2024, probably higher, is a safe assumption. And then we back into what we think we'll have to pay based off that interest rate, and then back into an average EAD, and that's how we get to that increment of 10,000. So it's a tricky question, but it's a good point.
I think one.
That is going to be a decision point for folks.
Sorry, Nikki. The only other point I was going to make is there is another significant factor that weighs on the calculation, and that's the village's bond rating. Glencoe is among the most elite governments in the state of Illinois from the standpoint that we are AAA rated by Standard & Poor's, and we have been for nearly 20 years. That does produce significant benefit to the overall community. And that benefit is generally a significantly lower interest rate than communities that are and governments that are rated less favorably. And so there are a number of components, and that is, I meant to mention that before, that's just another factor that goes into the calculations for those estimates.
All right.
Sure.
I just want to make the point that the member of the board of defense of our mission is to fundraise that part of our job. We haven't really got going yet because we need to know when we go to potential large donors, they need to know whether there's a village behind us or not. Once we get through that referendum, even more referendum actually, we feel confident that we will be able to do a significant job in line with the Campbell report June, which said that they would look to private funding from $2.5 to $5 million. I think that would be doable from our point of view. We will also be able to, once we get your blessing, bring on new younger members to the board. All this new influx of young people coming with their families to Glencoe. We have a lot of enthusiasm, but it's a question of the cart before the horse. But the fundraising that we can do, I believe, will be significant help towards the overall process.
Okay, well, good point. Well taken, I think. Discussed them. If the club winds up paying some of defraying some of the cost under of the agreement of otherwise cost, that will lower the amount of properties in addition. Maybe possibilities. Also, so that you have a figure quoted for probably see, not necessarily where we find it.
So this is not going to limit folks. There are two people who signed up. I want to make sure they get a chance to speak.
No.
Okay. It was an imposter. Okay. Joe Keefe.
Yes, up here, Mr. President.
Yes.
Thank you, appreciate it. Hi, everyone, good evening. My name is Joe Keefe. I have been a Glencoe resident since the late 1600s. Magellan and I came across. I have been a former village trustee, and I have served on every committee that was ever created in the village of Glencoe. Good evening, and thank you, board, for the opportunity to speak about this Glencoe treasure. It is a very easy task to illuminate the many benefits of the Glencoe Golf Course as a vitally important village asset. Critical preservation of open space, state-of-the-art conservation and sustainability management, benefits of outdoor exercise, and the strikingly beautiful conditions of this excellent course. That said, my input relates to the overwhelming positive economic benefits that the Glencoe Golf Course brings to this community. First, it's important to note that the Glencoe Golf Course has achieved profitability each year for more than 15 years. The smartest thing I ever did was to vote Stella to be hired here. This profitability attribute is remarkable, and it's a testament to the excellent management that is the hallmark of GCC. Village oversight for this institution has been supportive, diligent, and comprehensive of this wonderful enterprise. The pattern of consistent profitability is unique among Glencoe's competitors and is especially notable because those same competitors are able to host events much larger than our course. Competitors like Wilmette and Sunset Valley have new and expansive catering, clubhouse, and restaurant facilities that were built early in this century as opposed to being built early in the last century. In 2021, more than 44,000 players paid money to play Glencoe Golf Course. Nearly 85% of those players reside outside Glencoe's zip code. That's a very healthy statistic, by the way. This means that 37,400 visitors decided to invest their money both in the Glencoe Golf Course and also in the area's food and dining establishments. On average, visitors spend approximately $47 on dinner and drinks when visiting a town. In the case of Glencoe Golf Course, these expenditures produce a positive economic impact of $2,068,000 for our community and the surrounding area every year. Remarkably, these expenditures increased during the COVID era as golf was one of the few activities that people could pursue during the pandemic. Golfers are loyal patrons who prefer to spend money at local establishments. 62% of golfers say they prefer to spend money at smaller local businesses. The average income of a typical golfer is $125,000 a year. 1 in 4 golfers own their own business. 1 in 3 golfers is interested in purchasing property in the community. The fact is, if our village didn't have the attractor that is Glencoe Golf Course, it would be actively seeking a similar attraction for new visitors business owners, and prospective residents. This great Glencoe golf course takes its place alongside Chicago Botanic Garden and Writers Theater as a team of attractions, bringing thousands of visitors to our village each year. Every effort should be made to preserve, protect, and expand this excellent institution. I strongly support a referendum to ask residents to invest in this community asset. Thanks so much for your time and consideration. Thanks.
So now is an opportunity for members of the audience to speak up. I think
Oh, you can't follow that. Yes, exactly.
So I'm not even gonna try. If you're less famous than Mr. T, please.
I'm less famous. My name is Tom O'Laughlin, and I want to talk about croquet. I'm the president of the Chicago Croquet Club. We play at courts down in Jackson Park near the Museum of Science and Industry. And we're very excited about the development of croquet in Glencoe. We look forward to many years of interclub competition. Some of our members live on the North Shore, and no doubt will utilize the croquet facilities here. The croquet, like Ellis was talking, is a growing sport. There's a National Croquet Center down in Florida, which I think is like 14 courts, and they have to expand because they just bought new property because membership is expanding. It's played in New York, California, Oklahoma, all over the country. And with 2 courts here at Glencoe, Glencoe would have the opportunity to host tournaments, perhaps in conjunction with the club up in the Lake Forest, and would attract people from all over the country to this facility. At the National Croquet Center down in Florida, they'll hold many corporate events and teaching croquet, and that would also attract people. So I would encourage the board to not look at the croquet played only by 100-year-olds, but it's an active, tactical sport. It's not the sport that you may have played when you were young. It's exciting. My wife and I have played many years, and we enjoy it quite a bit. So thank you very much for your time.
Briefly,
Since we're going to have a record, tell us who you are.
Lynn Goldschmidt, a Glencoe resident. In fact, I grew up in Glencoe. The Glencoe Golf Club is an underappreciated asset in Glencoe's front. I grew up here. My dad golfed here just about every day that the course was open. So I've always known about this place. I grew up a couple of blocks from here. But as I mentioned earlier, I've been taking an informal poll of people in Glencoe who are not golfers. And a surprising, or maybe not surprising, number of those longtime Glencoe residents have never set foot on this property. We need to introduce them to this wonderful asset. And I believe that this referendum is the perfect vehicle to do that. I also believe that once they see and appreciate this beautiful property, that there will be support for the redevelopment project, which will benefit both golfers and non-golfers alike. Thank you.
Before the board talks about this, anyone else want to weigh in? Sure.
As Bill properly pointed out, it's true that the ability government itself cannot advocate or push the referendum. But the Friends is a 501c3 corporation. We are separate. There's nothing that prohibits us legally from advocating for. And we intend to do so. I think that may help introduce people who otherwise would be aware of the club and the benefits we're proposing to offer. They would be able to find out through that process.
Thank you. Anyone?
If I, Mr. President, I just
Come on up.
say
Come on up.
a very brief thing about the woman who just left. I'm best to honest. I'm not a resident of Glencoe. I'm a resident of Glencoe, but I am a croquet player. And earlier in the summer, Stella and us invited a few of us from the Chicago Croquet Club to come here about their plans. And she offered us a driving range to play croquet on Mondays and Tuesdays. So, and she had they did social media there, and they were opening ceremony croquet day. So a bunch of us from the club, invited all my friends. And just in the spirit of community spirit, like you know on the North Shore. And I started inviting all of my friends to come play croquet with me on Mondays. And I want to re-emphasize, I just heard the woman who was here previously about non-golfers. I don't golf. I have never stepped on this property, and it's Monday was my favorite day of the week, all summer long. I think we had the Chicago Croquet members come from Chicago, from Wilmette. I'm trying to think how far around people came. We had, 16 to 20 players on 2 courts at the height of the summer. And most of my friends who came are not golfers. I have to leave shortly for a women's library club meeting. I'm on that board and I came from that network. And a friend of mine came out one day and she said, oh my gosh, I've lived here for 25 years. I've never stepped foot on this property. I can tell you WLC, we talk all the time about, can we do an event at the golf club? Because we need places to host our events. We're disappointed the golf club won't be available in the winter. So I, from my own experience, just want to share with you, I think there is an opportunity here to engage the wider community. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think now a chance for the village board to talk about the immediate question is, are we going to put redevelopment of the clubhouse on the ballot for a referendum? And the subsidiary question is, what precisely we're going to put on the ballot for a referendum if we decide to do that. So, we've had a number of meetings about this, but let me open it up to the board. What do you think? If no one wants to speak first, I'm going to pick on Joe because you've been our liaison.
I'm happy to get, I mean, just look around. I mean, I like Greg said earlier, I mean, please go check out the washroom. We're gonna have another pandemic. It's gonna come from this building. So, again, I'll admit I'm a little biased. I was a Evans Scholar, so I caddied for 10 years before Acres, so I'm a little biased for the game and what it does. And having worked at a bank for 25 years, I've seen how people use courses for events, like Stella said. If you're ever in Naperville, go down to Seven Bridges and check it out. They have weddings every Friday, Saturday, Sunday from June through December. It's utterly mobbed. And there's a demand for a facility at a place like this for people that don't belong to Exmoor or Skokie or one of the other clubs that's extremely expensive to belong to. So I think as Stella mentioned, this isn't possible to keep this like it is now. So then the question is, what happens next, right? So looking at some kind of modular odd design, I think would be certainly a disappointing, inexpensive, disappointing aesthetically for what is otherwise one of the most beautiful spaces that we have in the village. When you think of Glencoe, you think of the beach, you think of the Writers Theater, and then the surrounding area, the booming downtown from the hometown in Guildhall that it stemmed from Writers Theater. And that really, very thoughtful development. I think this could be similar. That's what the development could be for creating another space for people in the village. So to me, I would assume that we're talking more about the people of the village would like to be able to vote on this and make themselves heard. And I think hopefully we're going to be able to, the conversation moves to at what level are we thinking about?
Question for staff. Are we looking at the $10 million option or the $15 million option? And if we would go for the larger option, if there were money left over, could you spend it on something else other than the golf course?
So I think why we wanted to present the information that we have tonight is to help you, to give us guidance as to the level of a referendum, the quantity of resources requested through a referendum question. I think as Stella walked through the alternatives that we have pulled together, I think I don't know if she was explicit, but I don't want to speak for you. I think option A was the one that generally seemed to make the most sense because it ticked most of the boxes from the standpoint of where she and the original clubhouse task force had kind of pointed this path. So I think the question of the number to some degree, unfortunately, falls back to the board to make an ultimate decision on. But as I've mentioned, I think we want to be mindful of the request to ensure that we feel as though it's going to be sufficient to complete the building. The question relative to if there are additional resources that could be utilized really depends upon the wording of the question. And we have to be very conscious. Do you want to answer that? Yeah, sorry, the referendum question. And I think that is something that we have worked carefully with bond counsel in the past. I would anticipate that if additional resources were gathered relative to fundraising, if we had additional bond authority, that those bond dollars really would be limited to golf club operation. I don't believe we could reallocate them toward a road project or water projects, because the question is going to be fairly directly related to this project and perhaps ancillary golf projects that feed into it.
Another question. If we did the $10 million, could we do an additional bond issue separate from that to add that increment, or use another source? Say we have savings someplace else, or we get a grant and we're able to reallocate some funds.
Certainly, that would be a possibility. I think, as you mentioned, there are alternatives that involve alternate revenue bonds that could be seen in a smaller quantity. I think if we were talking about an alternate revenue bond for the full cost of the project, that isn't a reasonable option. But if you're talking about a portion of it, that may be a possibility. I do think grants may be available, particularly for some of the green infrastructure that we've been talking about for this building. I do think there are resources that are available and will become available to the golf course in terms of unreserved, unrestricted reserves, sorry, that could be applied toward the project. And as I think the Friends have indicated, they intend to keep working on fundraising. And the problem with that is it isn't a guarantee. And I do think that's just one thing we have to keep in the back of our minds. And certainly we have, as we've been talking about this over the last several months, wanting to be mindful of the fact that project will need to be completed, and there should be resources adequate to get us to that point. And I do think, again, you don't want to ask for too much, you don't want to ask for too little. It's a difficult spot to estimate exactly, especially when we have a lot of volatility. And the construction market right now is volatile. The bond market, the interest rates at least, are higher than we've seen. So those aspects are also to be considered.
Gary.
Well, my bottom line is I certainly think there's been enough intense interest in this topic by enough folks in our community. And I believe there's enough benefits to the community, to the much broader community than merely people that play golf or croquet. Once people have the asset at hand and people start using it for a variety of family gatherings and restaurant purposes and meals, et cetera, and things that we haven't even thought of yet. My bottom line is I'm in favor of going and asking the community if they want to do this and pay for it. That said, I think there will be a real serious educational job to be done. And we are very limited as to what we can do without coming off as lobbying for it, which is their voting. So, other people are going to have to pick this up, but I think it's a heck of a story and some wonderful things. It's very easy to imagine having family events, et cetera, beautiful surroundings and all that. That said, if you're going to do it, you can't count on the fund. You're certainly hopeful, but you can't count on it. So you have to have a large enough referendum, I think, to pay for the whole thing. And then you have to, number one, nobody's let a contract. We don't even have an architectural plan. So whatever all these costs are right now, they're volatile. They'll probably also be coming down somewhat if the economists, writ large, are correct in terms of where we're going. So what the numbers are going to be a year from now may actually be better by the time you're ready to float bonds, get a shovel in the ground, et cetera, than where we're at now. So recognizing that we don't know what the fundraising will be, recognizing that, so we're going to want to cover ourselves, but we have lots of places where perhaps if you ask the community for whatever it is, 14 or 15, you might not need that much. And there are some reserves, so maybe the number doesn't have to be 15. And you don't have to float all the bonds at once. We did with the last referendum. We said we can't spend the money fast enough in this environment. We're not going to just float bonds and pay all that interest, et cetera, if we can't make use of the money for the community. So we floated 7 out of 10, and we said we have the rest. We know we've got lots of capital projects to do, and but we'll do that later. We can float these in stages, as long as we've got the authority to do it, so you can get the project paid for, which again, I would hope would encourage donors. So I am fully in favor. Sorry for the long-winded spiel, but I think there's a lot of very, very positive things here. And I think we can, even if we pick a number, that's not cast in stone. That doesn't mean somebody's tax bill's going up Y dollars. There's a lot of factors that are going to come into that, including the incremental revenue that will allow for abatements. That's another nuance. The problem is it's not simple. That's why it's going to be an education process. But we have a pretty smart community. And I think people understand it.
Yeah, I would also agree that we need to go for the larger amount. I do like certainty, and I would like to be certain that we're going to be able to finish this project. I also think it's a much better project with the bigger plan. All the sizzle that you're removing and kind of the second option, I think there's a lot of loss there. I mean, some of the amenities that are the most popular would be things like outdoor parks, bars or fire pits and different things. You want to make sure, obviously, you have all the teaching facilities indoors that you need. I think those are the things that are going to make the project really marketable. And it would be such a shame to do 90% of it and just cut off the fun stuff that people are really going to like and enjoy. So I would go for the larger thing. I also don't like to fail. And so if we're going to, float this referendum, I mean, we just have to make sure that the Friends, are able to devote all of the time and resources in getting that community involvement and educating them, because I think that's a huge process. It's a really huge project. Because, whenever you're talking about taxes, it is confusing to people. So I don't know if people are as smart as you think. I think you're just going to have to tell a story that is understandable, that everybody can relate to for different reasons. So I'm very much in favor of this, but I do want to go, I would like the larger amount.
Yeah, so I think sitting in this room, we all know that this has to get done. I don't think whether or not we put a referendum should even, that's not the question. I think the question is how much. We've been kicking this can down the road for too long. Let's do it. And so the next is 10 or 15 million. I totally agree with Gail. The stuff that made me excited were some of the things that would get cut. And so I actually think that the 15 is sort of important. I don't want to call it pie in the sky. I prefer to just refer to it as the appropriate plan. But then also talking very much about the finances related to it and not discussing it as a potential abatement of taxes and sort of this lots of moving things to try to get to the point where it ends up at the bottom line for the village. I think we need to talk specifically about the way that the golf course sends money to the village. And it may not pay for itself. It may not be enough to fully pay for the debt service, but sure seems to me like it could pay for a lot of it. And I think it would be a much easier discussion about raising that amount of debt if we talk a lot about all of the money that would come along with it. So there's the incremental revenue that would almost pay for it. And so I think that is really important for us to discuss and make sure that we bring that up. And I know we've always sort of, and this is, I'm on the finance committee, golf is part of finance. Stella runs the course extraordinarily efficiently. It has made it over the last 15 years an incredible place to play golf. And so we've sort of allowed it to operate on its own. And I think with a $15 million bond issuance, we will have to discuss it a little bit more from how it benefits the overall village from a financial perspective. And that can mean directly, but it can also mean some of the things that Joe mentioned, sort of the ancillary benefits, and maybe some shared things with the park district, and just finding ways so it becomes more integral to the overall village, which is a lot of what we've been talking about, a lot of the marketing that's going on for the Club of Glencoe. Some of these things sound amazing. I cross-country ski out here. If there was a place to go afterwards, I think that would be fantastic. And so I think there's so many wonderful things that could come along with the $15 million issuance and some fundraising on top of it, that I think we should focus on that. I think we need to focus very much on how it's not going to cost everybody $500 a bill on their tax bills. And that it'll be something, and we won't know exactly how much, but that this will help pay for itself because it's going to be such a real benefit, both from a revenue perspective, but then also just a tax perspective. And finally, my last piece is, unfortunately, the timing of the referendum is not going to come until April. And personally, I'm very concerned we'll be in the middle of a recession at that point. So, the conversation around $15 million debt issuance for golf in the middle of a recession may be difficult. So it's not that we can do anything about it. It's too late to do the November election, but that's the one thing that concerns me with the big number. Oh, one other question, and this is for you, Nikki. Callable bond, can we issue a bond that has callable components?
Yes.
So if we're in the midst of a 5%, market for muni bonds and we're paying 7, can we call it within a certain amount of time?
Yes,
Okay.
we can issue callable bonds. We would refinance. We could refinance it, but we could not extend the term past.
So,
It's still better, absolutely.
I think the points I will make have mostly been made, so I'm going to be short. We have to do some things, as Jonathan and a number of other people have said. So we could do the prefab trailer thing, which is not, horrible, but it's not what we want. And that would cost a boatload of money, and we won't be as happy about it. It won't cost the same boatload, but like $5 million by the time we're through. So this is harder than the bonds that Glencoe typically does. We do streets, we do sewers, we do water. Everybody gets that. It's not complicated. It's obviously necessary. Glencoe is unusual in that we happen to have a golf club and a golf course. Usually our districts have those. So it's a little off the path, but we have it. I absolutely, it is, I don't think golf is a fabulous space. And maybe this is, we can make it better and more valuable to more people in the village. This is not something that I would ever have the village board do without a referendum. If we were a home rule community and could simply say, we're selling bonds, I would say, no, we're putting it to the community because it's a little off. It's not streets, sewers, water. But we have the opportunity now to put it to the village. I think Lynn Goldschmidt is right. I mean, we're at, the $15 million project is right on the potential tipping point. So we will all have to be persuaded by the friends that this is a great project. We should do it, but if we don't put it on for referendum, this place is going to implode and we're going to have to put up a trailer and that just won't do. So I think we should put it up for referendum. We should work very hard in the interim to figure out the best possible plan so that our residents will want to do it. And then they get a say. And if they say, no, they don't, then we'll go to plan B. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, well, thank you. I think it sounds like 15. I mean, look, we can't do 10, and if we're running out of money, go back for 5, the answer is going to be no. I might vote no under those circumstances. So it seems to me we're going to, the hope is that we're going to say 15, and that Dale and Ellis and Jillian are going to put the arm on somebody who wants to put their name on this building and will have to spend less. But that's the hope. We can't, I have a house down the road. I live on a fairway, just down the street. There's a house that's been under construction for 2 years. We can't have, we can't have an unfinished building. So I think, we don't have a choice. We hope we won't have to spend it. We hope we'll have a brilliant plan that the money will come in low, that money will be coming in for whatever. But I think sounds like we should have a referendum for 15 and give the residents of the village the pros and cons. We hope there will be more pros, and they'll decide. We'll all decide as residents what we want to do. And if it doesn't pass, we will have to go to plan B. Anybody else have anything else? If not, that covers the discussion of the golf club. Is there any other business we want to talk about?
Okay.
I don't
We can talk about this.
I See, government advice that. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brad.
Yes.